Hello there, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. It's Addison here again, your favourite friendly furbog, and the pod of many things for another great episode where we're going to be talking about the Shadow of Mogg, presented to us by Manic Productions, and we have the man himself, Panny, here talking to us about Shadow of Mogg. We'll get more into that as we move forward. So, Panny, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm doing well today, thanks. How about you?
All right. I had to, like I was telling you before we went live, I had to take a quick power nap because I've been out and about. Because usually I'm a teacher, and then I'm on Easter break, so I'm like, oh, let's go do things, like go sort out my life, and I forgot how tiring it is not being in the same building all the time. But yeah, I'm good. So, before we go on, Panny, let's get the audience introduced to you, your history in the tabletop RPG space, like what sort of games you play, like all that stuff. So, Panny, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh yeah, so my name's Panny. I'm a London-based indie tabletop RPG designer, and long-time tabletop and role-playing fan. I started playing Warhammer was my first foray when I was about 9 years old, and I transitioned to Dungeons and Dragons when I was about 16, and then that was just a huge slippery slope into a wider world of role-playing games. That's basically me. But before times, I ran a London-based old school Dungeons and Dragons group. But this is like the first proper game that I've released and I'm here to talk about.
It's really impressive for first, like the presentation of it. I've got a physical copy come in that you've been so kind to send me, but like the presentation of it's marvelous. Like I really like the that like worn away feeling that you've got through the art and stuff like that. Was that of your design, or did you have collaborators on that?
So all of the layout was by me. The artwork was by a good friend of mine by the name of Aled Lawler, who runs his own production company called Anima Press. And he was also instrumental in sort of giving me guidance on the layout on the project. And he suggested the method that I adopted, which was, well, like effectively, and to be honest, I suck at InDesign. I'm terrible with digital art and design. So what he suggested was that I build piece for game together on paper, effectively. So each page of a game is an A4 sheet of paper that I've literally cut and pasted the snippets of the rules and the pictures and collated it together with other bits of like underground artwork and pictures of beans in my cupboard and all sorts of stuff, and then I've just scanned those pages in and cropped them down.
I was going to ask you if that's how you did it. Because obviously as a teacher, I'm used to the old photocopier. Like I'm like, yeah, and I just recognised a lot of like the almost like the markings and stuff like that, and the idea of like things are a bit wappy and stuff. I was like, kind of looks like it's been photocopied, but no, that explains it. So let's jump into the meat and potatoes then. If we're going to be talking about Shadow of Mogg, give me the elevator pitch for the Shadow of Mogg. What is the Shadow of Mogg? What's it about? What sort of system is it, and why should people pick it up?
So, Shadow of Mogg is a post-Brexit role-playing game. It's set in the London Underground, following like a catastrophic occurrence known only as the event. And you play as a group of survivors in the London Tube network, trying to eke out existence and still clinging on to democratic ideals from the before time. And the mechanics linked to that, the main unique mechanics are both group voting and resolution mechanics, where the entire party has to vote for every significant decision, and then all decisions are like resolved by the dice as a group rather than individually. And then consequences scatter out from that, all willy-nilly in myriads of interesting ways.
Yeah, it's really funny just how like. So you call it a post-Brexit RPG, and obviously that's a very hard-hitting British thing. Like, as it's been something that's divided us as Brits for a while. And obviously the London Underground is that like iconic thing. Did you choose the London Underground because of that like iconic status? Like, because you could have set this like in Scotland where they've become independent and stuff like that, or you could have said it. What made you want to do like the London Underground, even though it's post-apocalyptic and stuff like that?
Well, it was mostly my daily commute, to be honest. So this game started forming in my head in about 2018 or so, and I realised looking at the tube station, like map day in and out, that I was packed in amongst many other commuters, that it would make a really fantastic tunnel crawl, the like tube map. And by tunnel crawl, I mean that's sort of a concept from like old school D&D, which is one of my huge influences, where there's a big focus on like dungeon crawling, and there's a thing called a point crawl, which is like where you basically go from point to point on the map. And I just thought that would be a really interesting thing to turn into a game, so I started working on it then, and everything sort of came together from that initial idea of my daily 9 to 5 wage slavery misery. So
yeah, no, and I think I look through this, and I was talking to Laurie O'Connell, as they made Lichcraft, and it has quite a biting commentary about like the NHS and transitioning in the UK. And I feel as if this has that same sort of thing with like every single. This thing just drips and oozes satire and British black humor and like that stiff upper lipness, but like moaning about it sort of thing. I love like the flavor text and like the classes and stuff like that. So what made you like choose? So for example, if we go to the classes, and we'll talk a bit more about, I just want to get through the classes first, then we'll talk about the mechanics. What made you decide like on some of these, like Pandy Ponty firefighter, West Country farmer, the primary school teacher is probably my favorite. But and then like these, why have you chosen like these and the wig? Why are these specific people the people that you've decided to highlight in your game as these survivors and people desperate to carve out life in the London Underground?
So the initial like concept of the game when I first started designing it was effectively an old school like Dungeons and Dragons clone. So you'd have, instead of a fighter, it was a firefighter. Instead of a cleric, it was a nurse. And there was literally a psyker at one point. There was going to be like legitimate like horror and paranormal elements that eventually got removed. So, but then I was like, well, again, I want this to be about sort of ordinary people. I want this to be about the British public, like, so I don't want to have these like sort of D&D heroic classes. And then I played a game called Troika by Daniel Sell, which has 36 classes in it. Would you be surprised to know? Which form a sort of huge gamut of the strange, weird fantasy, sci-fi fantasy world of Troika. And I thought, well, that's perfect. I can do 36 classes, and then I can do like a whole wide range of like quote unquote ordinary people from British society, plus a few weird and wonderful ones as well. Hence, so I added farmers and teachers and all sorts of people within.
Yeah, like because some of them are great. Like some of them, you've got like, let's find. The Mogg wrestler. When is it okay to punch a fascist? And other silly questions liberals ask. You've got the Taylor Manners Maketh Man, which is obviously a reference to Kingsman, the film. You've got like Soldier. I quite like the East End Grifter. One born every minute. I just love the fact that it's so entrenched in like British expectations and stereotypes and stuff. Even the QMUL computer science graduate. You hope you can get a job now you're a STEM grad. Are there still jobs? Like it's like so sarcastic and witty, and like it hides like that darkness behind that humor of like Oh no! Like they're a bit like so for the STEM grad guy, like or girl, like their field is pretty much gone. Like so, you get that feeling of like, oh no, they might not make it. They may not be able to make it. They do not have the relevant skills to survive. So I quite like that, and I quite like I just like it in general how you've like made some really good like skill choices, and your stat system's really like simple. You roll that many d6s for how many points you've got in it, but then there's like other things like oral tradition, which is part of your BANT score. So instead of just going, oh, you can use oral tradition and LARPing, which they're just pretty funny. So let's talk about the system then, because these characters are funny, but they do have like mechanical and statistical benefits and stuff like that. So how did you come up with this system? What was the inspirations? You've talked about like old school D&D and the tube map. I've used the tube map in Mutants and Masterminds. I set a game in London and used the tube map to basically get them around London without having to have a whole map of London. So yeah, what system have you pulled from to create this like really funny and really interesting little indie RPG you've got going on here?
Yeah, so there's a few sort of system inspirations within it that go into the final sort of voting and resolution mechanics. The system's really split into two parts. So you've got the voting part, which is that's quite simple. It's basically every decision in the game has to be democratically voted on by the party. So that can be like, what direction do we go in the tunnels? Do we go to King's Cross today? Okay, that has to be propositioned and then voted on. Do we feed this child with the last of our resources, or do we leave them alone? That has to be voted on, and everything significant. Do we fight or flee from these people, etc.? And initially, that's just a sort of yay or nay, like you say, yes, we vote for that, or no, we don't. Type voting system, though the players can, as they explore, change how their like democracy works, or even abandon democracy. So that's the sort of voting half, and then there's the resolution half, which is the core dice mechanics of the game. They were influenced primarily by PBTA in terms of like the sort of framing and the consequences, and then a system called Year Zero, which is in Forbidden Lands and Alien in particular, as well as a few other games, which uses a dice pool, a D6 dice pool system, where basically you have to get a 6, which is a success, 5 is a partial success, 2 to 4 is a failure, and in Mogg 1's a critical failure. The big difference with that is, instead of rolling those dice individually, you roll them all as a group, and you collate your scores together. So you look at everyone's results, and you look for the highest amongst everyone's results. And the bids are done in secret, so you don't necessarily know how much your allies are going to help you until the dice are rolled, and then the whole thing sort of narrated all in one. So like, if there's a fight scene, it's all narrated out in one. If there's a role play scene, it's sort of narrated out, and then the speaker, which is the GM, sort of decides what the ultimate consequences will be. So that's the brief gist of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting system, because obviously voting or getting tabletop RPG players to vote on anything and to agree on anything is a pretty brave mechanical choice you've made. Like, oh, these people like to argue, right, and plan for hours. Like, how about we put pressure on? And like, you've got things like the party manifesto, where you can add, like, is it the party manifesto where you can like basically make it so that these things no longer need to be voted on? And I get that very like Orwellian, like Animal Farm-esque, like all animals are created equal, and then halfway through the game that's going to be like, so but some animals are more equal than others, like, and I'm like, oh no, like it. In terms of the resolution mechanic, though, is it about what you decide to bring to that like situation? So, for example, if I am like a Bant's character, a social character, would I add would I bring my bants to the table, or do I have to go along with like the party in terms of like, oh, this is a hench thing, so everybody has to contribute their hench role, or can I take stats that I want?
So the party vote for how they want to approach a situation, and then if the situation is like significant enough to warrant a roll, then you each sort of then describe how you're going to like support the party. So in theory, yeah, you could use your band score in a situation, because the resolution is done sort of scene based. So I don't know, if you have a group of Her Majesty's soldiers sort of guarding an area, and the overall decision is to maybe go in there and try and knock them out, and you vote on that, you could say, well, I'm going to use my bants to go up to them and distract them, and then maybe you can sneak around them with your lead pipe, and that would use their hench, and then maybe you can sing us a song from the background to inspire our morale because you've got some bagpipes, and so on and so forth. And then the party and the speaker sort of adjudicate that together, and then you pick a number of dice in secret based on your stat plus skill plus other bits and pieces like your tools and your any followers / mates, and then you just roll all the dice together and see what happens.
Because I'm also looking at like, so because one thing that, and this might be because I'm not used to like year zero, like I've never played Forbidden Lands. I my friend the Flickering Torch Ben, here's your free promo before you go. Like he's in love with that system. He loves everything about it. He loves the books, the maps, the like, little flags that it comes with and everything. And so do you take damage to your stats is how I've kind of read this. How does that work for those people who traditionally have hit points? Like hit points are very separate from your stats. How does that work for those people who don't know that?
So the key thing about like the reason that you bid for dice for commitment is because there is a risk in adding your dice to the pool. So, for example, if you have free hench, which is the sort of fighting strength stat in the game, and you commit 3 d6 as a result, you can commit up to 1 d6 to the pool for each point of the stat you have. And then you roll them. If you get a 1 on any of those stat dice, your stat lowers by 1, and then that can only be healed by like rest or having medication. And if it hits 0, you have to in this case roll on the bonk chart, and that can cause you permanent injuries based on the context of the situation, or even kill your character. So going down to 0 is pretty bad, and there's a potential to go down fast if you roll quite badly. So you're always going to be gauging your commitment, but on the other hand, if your group fails in the overall task, you all suffer the consequences of the failure. So if you're too stingy, you can still get bitten. You can still get bitten by it, which I like to think is an analogy for like people who like liberals who don't go out and protest and vote, because you're still stung by it even if you don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
That decisions.
Yeah, that idea of like you've got to use your vote, use it or lose it. I quite like that because the one reason why I'm asking that about like the stats and stuff, because I'm looking at the proletariat, like not one but many feet, and the fact that like there's very specific rules if your hench hits 0 and stuff like that. Like, and I'm just like, how? So that's on a 1 or a 2. Did you say that the dice disappears?
That's on a 1 of a d6. So
okay.
If you roll your 3 hench and you get like a 4 or 5 and a 1, your hench will go down by 1 as a result, and that applies to all your stats. So your bants and your noggin and your dash, and then broadly they're split into kind of mind stats and physical stats. And there's 2 separate charts. So there's a bonk chart and a stiff upper lip chart. The bonk chart covers physical injuries, and the stiff upper lip chart covers like emotional and mental trauma.
I do love that. One of my friends does say that one of the good things about Forbidden Lands is like the fumble and the failure tables, like how much like cool stuff you can get, and like sometimes they're like just weird and wonderful, and other times it is just like, no, you dared, you dared, like deal with it. So I do think it's really cool that you've managed to pull that over into this, and like just look at those two elements as well differentiated. So like if there's a physical consequence, that physical consequence is physical and it's not going to change anything else, whereas the mental consequences are mental and they don't change anything else either. It's just really interesting to think that you've thought of that. And I think it's just like everything seems symbolic. Every little bit of this seems as though, right, okay, I'm going to tell some sort of story about British politics and British society through every single mechanic, like underground train driver. So like union striking, because we all live in fear, especially if you live in London, of the unions calling a strike. So you're like, and it's a hench score because of the fact that people know that if you drive the trains in London, like you pretty much have the power to like stop London for the day, which nobody wants. So it's like a strength thing, not a like balance thing. I just love like everything seems rich and symbolic of something. Was that what you were intending to do?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it was meant to be like multi-layered with yeah, references and symbolism and all sorts of things like that. Yeah, particularly like that's a good example of the union strike ability. And the skills in the game are they're specifically quite idiosyncratic. So they're stuff like union striking or proselytizing or cucumber sandwich making, I think might be one of them. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. And so the skills, so skill dice add to your pool. So if you have 3 on a skill, you can add an additional 3 of that skill. And the good thing about skill dice is they don't degrade you, so you can always add them to a pool quite safely, as long as you're using one of the related stats. So as long as you're using 1 hench dice, you can add one of your appropriate hench skills to the roll. So they're like so they're purposely quite specific, but they're quite powerful as a result of being high.
And they don't go down on a 1 like the others?
No, they stay static, and they can even go up in terms of you can like train up new skills, and you can learn new skills as well that you've like either witnessed or want to, or to have someone to like train you up on during the kind of Koch phase of the game, which is like the rest phase for the American audience who need a translation.
Oh yeah, just unfortunately, like I do want to talk to you about like how you think Americans are going to perceive this, because you got things like scran, so like for food, and then you've got like juice for like energy and stuff like that. You've got Molly, which is like what we would know as a drug, but also is for like healing and stuff. And well, healing in a way, because I think you can like overdose on Molly, can't you? Like stuff like that. It's just like oh my god, how it's gonna. Did you ever watch the film 51st State?
I did, yeah.
When Samuel L. Jackson's character is in London, he just has no idea what anyone's saying. I feel as if like that's what's going to happen here. So what? Like obviously this is a post-Brexit RPG. It's taken the mick out of like the Conservatives, and especially with the shadow of Mogg, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Like you had to explain that to me because I just couldn't connect it for a second. I was like, oh, the guy who looks like a Dickensian villain. Do you think that politics and stuff, like especially in a comedic sense, is important to like put into like tabletop RPGs? Because a lot of people look at like tabletop RPGs as something to like escape, and I feel as if you've made something that you can use as escapism but doesn't make you forget things. Like it's just so clever. So how do you feel about that, like in terms of like the escapism aspect?
So I'm one of those people who like believes that everything is political. So whether or not you're trying to make a political statement, I think it's impossible to inherently separate politics from your work, because we live in a society and all that. That being said, this is a very like explicitly political game with layered with a lot of political references that ultimately is like trying to explore like democracy. That's what it really comes down to for me, because I think the Brexit vote like shook the country because it was a chance for England to have a democratic like vote and a referendum vote that was literally a, you know, whoever gets the highest percentage of votes wins, rather than a first past the post system, which gets criticized for being like not really caring about the majority of voters, but just like specific constituencies even. Yeah, so I really wanted to explore that within the game. I mean, the game does come with, like, at the front, there's like your safety tools and things like that. And you know, this is a mature game. Play it with people who are a bit understanding of this thing. I always suggest 2 tools, lines and veils, which let you basically say things you don't want to be in the game, as well as X cards, which let you like raise a card or say X to just stop the game temporarily if something comes up that makes you uncomfortable for any reason. I think those are important things to include. And obviously, if you're running this sort of thing, I think you need to prep your group and be like, this is what we're in for. Yeah, I still think it's important, and I think it's important to write about, you know, politics, include that in games, and include that in art. And I think there's obviously a long history of art being intertwined with politics.
Yeah, no, and it is really clever how you've done it. Like in a lot of it is in the representation of this world after the event, and the characters involved that you've decided to give as classes. So I'm looking again at something like the aristocrats, sorry, and just the fact that class privilege, hunt, fuck the poor, private education, like all these things that give off the sort of, I don't know, like the essence of how we feel in Britain. But as part of that, one of the things that I worry about with this game, and because it's really good, and I think that a lot of people should play it, is like, do you think that by making it so entwined with like British society and values and like the idea of British culture, that you are somewhat like fencing off an audience like the Americans? How are they going to react to this, like not knowing what gubbins are, for example, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I am absolutely quite purposefully fencing off an audience, or as I like to think, targeting a specific audience. So I think one potential mistake, depending on your design of your game, and especially if you're like an indie designer like me, who is a pretty much unknown quantity, is to create something that's like really, really broad in terms of design. The stereotypical example is like the quote unquote like heartbreaker RPGs, which are basically like Dungeons and Dragons clones, like someone's house rules of D&D, that they formed into a usually a quite well designed game, but one that's so broad that the market isn't really going to necessarily engage with it. That's not always true, and there's lots of ways to make fantasy games, obviously, and so on and so forth, and all these efforts are often really well done. But I really wanted to make something specific. I want the people who want to buy this game to see it and be like, that's an instant buy for me. Rather than and if there's like Americans who don't understand it, then I'm okay with that, because I'm aiming for a very specific, like London based role playing gamers who are a bit liberal and like jokes about Monty Python. But I'm okay with that, and I think it's done quite well considering, again, this is my first like game on the market because of that like targeting.
No, I think it's like I said, I don't mean that as a criticism. If it came across as well, no, it's like I think lots of people should play this because of the fact that it talks about something like the Monty Python references. It's got the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's got like Church of England vicar, like it's just so good. Everything's just the Brixton Bobby. Like all these things that are just really interesting and so rich in terms of their like satire and everything. I think that people should experience it. Do you think that you could ever do you think that you could ever make this for like New York or something? Would you like release expansions to do with other political systems, or is that like, nope, not for me, that's too much effort?
Yeah, so you've touched on something there. In the back of my head, I've like vaguely contemplated like doing a. I was going to do like a Shadow of Pence. Like, if that when the Portland riots were happening, but then unfortunately, like let's say unfortunate. Damn, I can't get my game out because Joe Biden went and won and Trump got and politics become. Well, I don't know. Politics is politics. And it's still there's still a lot of potential to make something set in America, even if a political situation is a little bit more stable. So yeah, I've contemplated that as well as a few other ideas which play with the concept but move it to different localities. Though for the moment, I'm happy like grounding it in. I think it is grounded in London. Though yeah, it's definitely an option, and probably the best way to like replicate the game would be to use like different, quite specific.
Almost like localization in video games, isn't it? Like we're gonna make it so that you understand by putting in people that you know, like and putting you in places that you know, rather than so yeah. Because I was talking about this with like Laurie when I was talking about Hieronymus, which is his hex crawl through the paintings of a medieval painter called Hieronymus Bosch, which depicts sin and the fall of feudalism. That's specific. Like, and then like Lichcraft, which is like in out of spite because the waiting list is 300 years old. It's 300 years. You're going to turn yourself into an undead lich in order to transition into being the gender that you wish to be, out of spite to the Tory government. And do you think that you kind of hit it on the head? Like, do you think that as an indie RPG, you have to find like niches that you can carve your way into, rather than do these big, broad, like you said, heartbreaker RPGs?
Yeah, absolutely. You do need to find a niche of some description. Now, I don't think you always have to create something like super like targeted and idiosyncratic and specific and all over the place, odd and whatnot. I think you can be quite subtle with it in ways like I think I don't know if you call like Old School Essentials quite an indie game, but it's a good example of like a way to take a pre-existing game and market it for. If you don't know, Old School Essentials is basically a basic and expert Dungeons and Dragons clone, which is the game that came out in the original D&D that came out in the 80s. Old School Essentials just updates it and lays it out really, 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 really well. And there's an inbuilt audience already, and the layout is really what sells it, because it's just really, really well laid out. But it's ostensibly just a copy and paste of D&D, which has been around for about 40 years or so plus. So there's ways of there's definitely ways of like targeting, and if you still want to make a more broad like fantasy game, I think yeah, like but yeah, I still think you do need to work out some sort of niche, because for better or worse, the hobby is dominated by Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition in particular at the moment, and you're going to have to find people who want to play something different to that. And if it's too close to that, a lot of people are going to be like, no, I just played D&D.
Yeah, definitely. I see that. I see that, because yeah, why would I go out of my way, buy this new system and yada yada if I'm just going to play Dungeons and Dragons again when I could just play Dungeons and Dragons? So yeah, because that's what I've been looking for recently in terms of like, I feel a bit like I finally hit that point where I no longer, because I was one of those people, I'm not gonna lie, who was like, yo, I only play Dungeons and Dragons, I've got no time for the rest of it. Like, I want to invest in one thing, and I think slowly I've began to realize that, you know what, actually I could start playing other stuff. So it started off with like Knights Black Agents, Blades in the Dark. I'm now playing Mecha Hack, which is a Black Hat game. I've got Good Society, the Jane Austen RPG. I really want to play this. Like, I'm beginning to like broaden my tabletop RPG palette, if you will. Do you think that's important for tabletop RPG players to like experience different things and experience different games, or do you think that just do what you like, even if it's the same thing all the time, like because this has multiple like trains of thought, like.
I think it's really important if you're a designer or influencer or blogger within the industry to explore a wide gamut of different games, but specifically if you're like doing that, I suppose. The influences for Shadow of Mogg came from like so many different directions. I played a lot of like Scum and Villainy, which was inspired by Blades in the Dark, and Blades in the Dark as well influenced the game, as well as there was a zombie game called Dead of Winter, which had a voting mechanic in it. It's a board game, which I played, and that inspired it to a degree, as well as all sorts of other things. And I think especially if you're designing, I think you need to reach as broadly as possible within the industry to see what's out there, see what people are doing, and to get like as many ideas as possible. However, if you're playing, like I don't want to be like sort of bad, wrong fun about it. Like if you're playing and you just want to play D&D every week with your buddies and you don't really care about anything else within the industry because you've got your fifth ebooks and you're quite happy, then go for it, enjoy your life. But if you want something else, there's lots of cool other games out there that I think are genuinely like worth exploring because they're fun and they do broaden like how you approach games. Certainly, and I'd add as well, certainly as a dungeon master, if you're maybe just playing, maybe you don't need to, but as a dungeon master, I find even if you're just going to dungeon master D&D, reading other games will give you a lot of ideas on how to like run games, like reading like PBTA, for example, like Apocalypse World and all that jazz, did so much for like improving my Dungeons and Dragons games without us even playing PBTA, just because I started including some of those ideas within it. So I think it's important from a maybe a top-down design or game running level. But if you're playing and having fun, you do you and all that.
Game design is something that I've always found quite intimidating. Like my friend Ben, again, here he goes, is beginning to design his own tabletop RPG. It's kind of like in the vein of Men in Black meets the Fae. So instead of aliens, they deal with like the Fae instead. And there's like a bureaucracy mechanic where if you don't fill in the right forms, like you get more and more restrictions and stuff like that. What do you think people need to do in order to get into design? Because like I look at it and I'm like, nope, I'm good, I'm fine. Like I'll leave it there. How would you encourage people to get into games design? What's the biggest barrier to entry, and how can you overcome that?
Ooh, so well, the industry is a like really small industry, like so there's no real genuine official route into the industry. In the same way as certainly now this is a fairly recent development, but within the video game world, you can now go to university and you can do a video game design course. That certainly wasn't the case. Sure, when they first started, but certainly maybe in the 80s you couldn't do that. But you still can't go and do a tabletop role-playing game design course at like a university level, like a properly credited level. Like there isn't really an authority like that. So your path in is really just do it. Like it's really stereotypical, but like just play games, run games, and just write stuff and design stuff, and just keep making stuff and keep doing stuff, and you'll eventually be able to create something that hopefully you'll be confident enough to want to publish. There's and publishing now, like digital publishing in particular, is arguably like easier than ever. Like you can go on sites like Itch and Drive-Through, and even like setting up your own sites these days is fairly simple to like promote your own games and design your own games. So yeah, my best suggestion is just sit down and do it. But like network as well, like find designers in your area, talk to your friends about games, like and go to industry events if you can, go to games expos, try and find people there to talk to. Like there's lots of little things you can do, but mostly just design, just do it, just design games and play test for them and then keep designing them. Yeah.
That makes sense. Like that's pretty good. Like it's how a lot of industries work, isn't it? Network, ask your friends, do it. Like take their criticism or their advice, do it again. Like so you mentioned your friend who owns Axiom Productions. Did I get that right, or have I
Anima Press.
Anima Press? So do you work closely with them, and are you releasing Mogg through Anima, or is this just completely independent yourself as Manic Productions?
Shadow of Mogg is a Manic Productions game. I'm like launching it and running it and distributing it myself, etc. Anima Press have their own game called Mutants, which is another zine game, which is you play as cats, but cats with mutant powers like laser vision. And that's available on their website, and they're hopefully producing some other cool stuff coming out in the future.
That's actually sound pretty cool, not gonna lie. Like
they help me with the artwork and a lot of like layout advice and things like that. Alad's very good with art and design work in particular. They gave me a lot of support, and we both like threw in our pitch on. So we kickstarted with Zine Quest 2. So Alad kickstarted Mutants, and I kickstarted Shadow of Mogg. So we were sort of doing it together, and we were talking about like thinking of doing like wider collaboration down the line and seeing where it would go. But then COVID happened, and we everything so we just sort of retreated to our bedrooms instead, and worked on our own stuff.
So I was going to ask about like as one person, like you obviously you've got the banner of Manic Productions. That's like your production company, but you are one person. I understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
That must be quite a Herculean task you've got there of like setting everything up, doing the Kickstarters, doing the itch stores and everything like that. How do you feel about that? Like, because you're essentially giving your work over to a third party in terms of the public or another website to like storefront it. Do you not feel like anxious or anything about that? Like I think that Kickstarter would give me a fucking heart attack. I'm not going to lie. Like, what if we don't make it, sort of thing?
Anxiety I think is something I struggle with in general. I have a personality disorder, technically speaking, which makes things even more difficult than they normally would be. However, I am also as it were, a person pretending to be a company, pretending to be a person on social media, etc. in particular, and it is a lot of work. Like doing it yourself is an incredible amount of work. Like I was lucky to have again the support of Alad and Anima Press in terms of like art, and also the advice was in particular instrumental, and I probably couldn't have done it without that. My partner Tess was really, really helpful and supportive as well, and I was lucky there. But yeah, it was it's an effort on my own. I am, I suppose, fortunate. I don't know if I mentioned, so I did used to work within for a company called Modifius, and I worked as a marketing person within them, within their company. They produce like Conan and Star Trek Adventures.
I was going to say like they're
Yeah.
a tabletop RPG company, Modifius. Like I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The Fallout miniature game as well. They've got they've got a really huge library of games, and I think working for them, like working for any tabletop company or small company in general, you end up wearing a lot of different hats, and you end up doing a lot of different things during the day. So I do PR, I do the social media accounts, I'd do a bit of event stuff. I do all sorts of, I do some play testing. I do all sorts of stuff as required. I start being videos and make some content, and I think that gave me a lot of confidence to do all that stuff, but like for my own website and my own, I'm releasing my own game.
So do you still work with Modifius now, or have you got a new job? Like, obviously you don't have to say it if you don't want to, but like, because I can imagine that's pretty cool having a job like that where you you do something you love, and then you take those lessons that you learn from that and like apply them to your own projects that you wish to get out there into the world. So you're still working for Modiphius, or have you moved on? Is Manic Productions now your full-time thing?
Yeah, no, so I no longer work for Modiphius. I left them for personal reasons. And yeah, Manic Productions. It's pretty much my full-time job. I do some freelance like marketing stuff as well, and I do this and that. I run a few D&D games for Cold Hard Cash, which helps out as well. So yeah, I guess I do this and that and keep myself busy.
Oh, that's cool. I've always been so just so you're aware. So sometimes I have cognitive dissonance because I'm autistic. So I have like cognitive dissonance. I can't make things work in my head because they logically don't make sense. One of those things is pay to play DMs. Like I'm like, but how? Because usually when you pay for something, you offer a service that only you can provide, and like it is not reliant on anybody else for you to provide that service. For example, a mechanic does not need you to buy them a car to work on. They can work on any car and stuff like that, as long as they're trained to do so, and like only they can do that. Whereas I feel as if with dungeon mastering, it's very strange because without players, you don't have a game. Like I need players to do what I want to do. So I find it really weird to charge for that because it's not a one-way transaction, I think is the best way to put it. So can you help me get my mind around like pay to play DMs and stuff like that? Like how does it work? What do you do? Like how do you charge for it? Because like you see some people, it's like 30 quid per person per session. And I'm like as a teacher, my time is worth 30 quid an hour to teach kids to pass exams that will determine the rest of their life. Like I'm like, that's the most I can charge. So that like blows my mind. How do you work that like pay to play DMing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So I guess the way I frame it in my head is just like hiring a private entertainer, like hiring a comedian for your birthday party, or hiring a juggler or something like that, or a magician. So you're hiring someone with a set of like skills and experience to run or present something like bespoke to you. I agree. Players do add a huge amount to any game of like any role-playing game, and so I can understand there's a bit of like, well, aren't they like giving a lot as well, which I do agree. But like in sort of raw capitalist terms, at the moment the market is in such a place that there's a huge player demand and nobody wants to DM, which seems to imply that like dungeon mastering does take a degree of like time, skill, and effort, and evidently that is something that people are willing to pay for. I will caveat it, like I would much rather run all my games for free, but people are willing to offer me money for them, and I like to pay rent and eat food.
Oh no, yeah, totally. Like, mate, if you can,
bad taste for it, really, but
yeah, if you can do, like, it's just as someone who's of your mindset, like players contribute just as much. Like, I find it really difficult. Like, I just find it, and that's just me needing to get over that wall. But like, yeah, if you can, like, there's a famous quote, like, find what you love and get paid, or don't do what you love for free. Is that the quote? Like, or don't do something you're good at for free, whatever. Like, don't do it for free. So I think more power to you. It just confuses the hell out of me. But hopefully one day I'll get it, and hopefully one day somebody will pay me, because I could deal with that cash. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like,
just put an ad up. You honestly, like,
oh, is it? Because yeah, that is a good point. That like it's a seller's market, isn't it, at the minute, in terms of like that sort of thing. Because for some reason nobody wants to DM. Like I kind of understand why, but because you get stuck there, and everybody hears the RPG horror stories of like, oh, I'm stuck behind I want to play, but my players like, so yeah, I can imagine that's pretty scary. especially for new players as well, because I imagine that a lot of the customers you get or customers or players you get are newer, maybe, like, to the hobby.
Yeah, often new players. Well, I've had some like very experienced groups play with me as well, and often like the thing. I mean, it's a thing I do. I've always done for my home games, generally speaking, but also I do as a service, which is like I will customize the campaign if you so desire to whatever you want to play in or as, and we'll have a big discussion about that. So yeah, players who want to specifically play a city-based noir game or a ancient Greek game or whatever it is, I can do that for them. And I think it is hard to when it's not, I guess, service based, to go to your GM who's already offering all their time and effort, and then be like, no, you have to give us this thing. And,
Yeah.
but I can do that because I'm being paid for it, and also that's how I generally like to do it anyway, because I feel games work better when everyone's engaged with them, and I like exploring lots of different things. I'm also one of those weird people who prefers GMing to playing, so I'm lucky there, but I can understand why not everyone does.
I feel at the moment that I need to play for a bit again, because I feel like the DM battery's running out a little bit, and I feel like I'm getting a bit samey. I need to like see other people, to magpie stuff off them and steal stuff off them to move forward and be a better DM in the future. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept that you talk about there in terms of like tailoring experiences, especially when we think about like session 0 and everything like that, and some of the controversy around that concept, like session 0. There's been a bit of controversy about like checklists. I've talked about this with one of my other friends on another episode of the podcast, but like they're like checklists, and it's a scam. There was a Think DM article where they were like, session 0 is a scam, and then using that headline, they were like, but that's not what the article says. And I'm like, then you're just a shit journalist, my friend. Like, well done, you're a fraud. So yeah, I think that to have that customizable experience is really good and really fun, especially if everybody's into it. Like, you've got Pharos, which can help you craft ancient Greek adventures. You've got Waterdeep for noir and stuff like that. So or it might be an opportunity for you to bust out games like Mogg and Blades in the Dark for people and go, well, there is, if you want to play D&D, that's fine, but there is also this, which allows you to do cool shit. Like one of the things I really like from Blades in the Dark, and I'd love to be able to apply, is like the flashback mechanic. Like, I fucking love the flashback mechanic. Like, it's got to be realistic though. Okay, like, so yeah, that would be sick. But yeah, like, I feel as though we've covered a lot here. We've covered a bit like about the game and the massive amounts of satire in it. We've talked about a bit about how politics are infused in games. I feel like the tabletop RPG space can be a bit politically charged, with things like representation taking a massive, especially in the wake of things like the combat wheelchair. Conduct with certain streamers doing creepy things like on the internet. So I feel as though you've actually also created a game for an audience who would be very receptive of it, in terms of like, oh, we talk about politics, and we talk about like identity politics, gender politics, and all that jazz. So to have that in a game that's all encompassing is pretty good. So I think it's a great game. I really want to play a game and review it, and hopefully afterwards you'll see that, and you hopefully it goes well and we can help you out and stuff like that. Before we go, because we're pretty much heading up to an hour and 15 minutes, I don't want to keep you forever, as much as I enjoy talking to you about the symbolism and stuff inside your game, and like the layers of the onion that we keep peeling back. Like, we have something called the Deck of Many Questions on the Pod of Many Things, and I would like to ask you if you'd like to partake in that with me. Absolutely. So we'll both, you'll get to choose 2 numbers, one for yourself and one for me, and I will answer that question honestly. You will answer that question honestly as well. Some of these are quite spicy. Some of them are a bit Dungeons and Dragons focused. They're not very like difficult. There are things like, what's your favorite class, and rah, rah, rah. And then there's things like, if you had to, what are you going to sleep with in the monster manual? Like, it's a random thing, so hopefully you can avoid some of the more loaded questions, and you can find some of the more sensible ones. If you wish to stack the deck in our favour and you're listening still, send in your questions on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you can contact me. I will take them on and I'll put them in the deck for people to choose. So, Panny, what between 1 and 75 is the choices. You may choose or roll and see what you get.
Let us randomize.
Let's randomize between 1 and 75.
I've got one. 52.
52. What is the worst class or subclass for your favourite race? What is the worst class or subclass to pair with your favourite race in D&D or any other RPG?
My favorite race is human, because I love old school Dungeons and Dragons, where there's you've basically got dwarf, human, elf, and halfling, and that's what and that's pretty much it. And I think humans are just a sort of iconic standard. And I've always hated the acrobat in old school D&D. I just don't see the point of a thief that can just jump really well. And I'm always reminded of Robin Hood in the bad Batman film, the second one with George Clooney, where he's like jumping around. And so yeah, I'd go human acrobat.
Human acrobat. Awesome, brilliant. Would you like to choose one for me then?
We've got 56.
56. That question seems incomplete. It says, do you even, and then just question mark? Is that like, do I just go again, because I have no idea what I think I might have actually deleted that. Do I even? Do you even? Like I do. I do. I even. I aren't also.
I 32.
32. What makes a bad player, in my opinion?
Ooh.
Okay. I've recently just recorded a podcast with my friend Breaking Rads about problematic players, and talking about those problems and how we can work around them and fix them or get rid of them. And I think one of the worst things a bad player can do is not understand what they're doing to the group in general and with their character. So, for example, a game that I played in was a one-shot with me, my wife, first ever game of D&D, and two of our friends. We went around our friend's house, and he ran his custom adventure, which was like this manor house crawl through. You're investigating this manor house because apparently there's something there. And in the first hour, we did not get inside the house. Instead, the other two players formed like a mini party themselves, a duo, and me and my wife formed a duo. And one of the players kept being like aggressive towards like my wife and like her character and stuff like that. And I was like, so we killed each other, like straight up. We killed each other because the DM lost control. The other person didn't realize what they were doing. So I think that what makes a bad player is if you do not realize the consequences of your actions and you don't think about like what you're doing. And this can go for things like character creation as well. Like you might not think that the character you've created is somewhat harmful or offensive, but like, dude, like think about it. If you're going to create a character of a different ethnic origin to yourself, please be mindful that maybe not doing voices and racist stuff is a good idea. Like, just just food for thought. So bad players are people who don't realize what they're doing. Like they don't think about things and don't think about it in terms of the group as a whole. So they're a bit selfish in that manner. So that's what I think is a bad player. And that might change over time. I might go, you know what, I'm a bad player. I'm obnoxious as fuck. Like, so yeah. That is the deck of many questions. If you wish to stack the deck in our favour, out of our favour, add a little more spice, get us to reveal a few more secrets, please put them in the comments below, in the DMs of me on Twitter and Instagram, and anywhere else you can find me at the Pod of Many Things. But yeah, Panny, thank you so much for coming on. Would you be so kind as to tell us where we can find you on the internet, where we can get the Shadow of Mogg from?
Absolutely, and yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great chatting. Yeah, you can follow me at Manic Prod on Twitter, and you can find Manic Productions at manicproductions.co.uk. That would be the main place. Yeah, I'd suggest getting the game, which is available now in digital, softcover, and hardcover aristocrat versions.
No, it is. I'm really looking forward to like my version coming through, putting that on the shelf, ready to one day play with the boys, maybe in and girls, maybe in person if the event doesn't happen, because the event seems to be currently happening.
Do not think about the event.
Do not think about
the event.
Mate, it's been too many bongs since I've been outside. I can't help it. But yeah, thank you so much, Panny. And if you're still here, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're well, and I hope that we get to hear your voice, see your comments, have you listen next time. See you in a bit. Bye.